The first thing people noticed wasn't the flowers or the string quartet or the ice sculpture shaped like a swan. It was the empty chair in the front row. White folding chairs stretched in perfect lines across the manicured lawn, every one of them filled with somebody in a suit or a dress that probably cost more than my first car. The sun was just starting to dip, turning the sky that soft, expensive kind of gold they use in perfume commercials. The air smelled like roses and money. And there, dead center in the front row, was a single chair with a little card tied to the back, reserved. The wedding planner kept glancing at it like it might explode. She clutched her clipboard to her chest, whispering into a headset, eyes darting between the chair, the aisle, and the man standing under the floral arch. The groom. His name was Ethan Cole, 28, dark blue suit that fit him like it had been sewn on. His parents owned half the high-end subdivision seen around here. He looked like the kind of guy who'd grown up knowing what the right fork was for salad and how to golf before he drove. Right now, though, he didn't look calm or polished. He looked mad. The string quartet kept looping the same soft piece, trying to pretend they didn't notice the tension. Guests shifted in their seats. Someone in the second row checked his watch and muttered something about starting on time. The kid kicked his shoes against the chair in front of him until his mother snapped her fingers for him to stop. Up at the front, the officiant leaned toward Ethan, voice low. "Are we good to begin?" Ethan's jaw clenched. He glanced past the rows of chairs, out toward the long gravel drive where the valets were still parking German cars and glossy black SUVs. "We're not starting," he said, "until her father is here." The wedding planner's head snapped around. "Ethan," she hissed, taking a step closer. "We've been over this." Olivia said. "He's not invited. The photographer is losing the light. We need to start." He didn't look at her. "I said what I said." A little whisper started in the front rows, the way whispers always do in expensive crowds. People tilted their heads toward each other, hiding their mouths behind programs. "Is there a problem? Who's missing?" "Her father, the original one." "Oh, that one." The officiant tried again, his smile glued in place for the guest's benefit. "I understand this is important, Ethan, but we're already 20 minutes behind schedule. Perhaps, then he should be here," Ethan said quietly. "We're not doing this without him. My name is Jack Mercer. I'm 55 years old, and the smartest thing I ever did was love my daughter. The dumbest thing I ever did was let other people tell her who I was. I wasn't there yet, standing under that arch. I wasn't even in one of those chairs." At that exact moment, I was miles away in my small kitchen, staring at my phone like it had just pulled a gun on me. I only know what happened at the venue because people told me later. Ethan, my sister, a couple of guests who felt guilty once they realized whose side they'd been on. But even if I hadn't heard their versions, I could have pictured it. The glass chandeliers hanging from the white tent poles, catching the last light. The designer flowers climbing up the wooden arch, white and blush and soft green, arranged so perfectly they didn't look real. The valet line full of shiny cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a Tesla or two, all lined up in a neat row of success, and one old pickup truck that wasn't there. Somewhere behind that arch, in a separate building with white shutters and a balcony wrapped in ivy, my daughter was standing in a wedding dress. Olivia, my little girl who used to sit in the passenger seat of that beat-up truck with ketchup on her chin, telling me that when she got married, I'd be the one walking her down the aisle. At least that's what she used to say. A few hours before Ethan refused to start his own wedding, my phone had buzzed on the table next to my chipped coffee mug. I'd wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, thinking it was going to be her. I thought she'd be sending me directions or a reminder about what time the ceremony started, or maybe a nervous, "You'll be there early, right, Dad?" Instead, the message was short: "Dad, please don't come to my wedding." I must have read that line 10 times, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something that made sense. Waiting for a winking emoji or a "just kidding" to pop up after it. It didn't. A second message came through before I could even type a reply. "Please, it will just make things harder. This is what Mom and I agreed. Respect this, okay?" I stood there in my quiet little kitchen, the same one I decooked her grilled cheese in when she was 9 and wouldn't eat anything else, and I realized my daughter was asking me to erase myself from the biggest day of her life, and I had to decide whether to disappear like they wanted or show up anyway. When my phone buzzed that morning, I thought it would be directions to the venue. Instead, my daughter told me not to come. And I made the worst and best decision of my life. I was halfway through making a cheap cup of instant coffee when my phone lit up with Olivia's name. I just banged the jar against the counter to loosen the last stubborn crystals. A little cloud of dust floated up, smelling faintly bitter. Sunlight pushed through the thin blinds over my sink, catching the steam from the kettle and the fingerprints on the window I kept meaning to wipe off. My townhouse is small. One bedroom, one bath, an open little kitchen that feeds straight into the living room. Beige carpet the landlord probably installed during the Reagan administration. Second-hand couch. Old oak coffee table I'd refinished myself. It's not much, but it's mine. The fridge hummed behind me the way it always does when it's about to kick itself into a louder rattle. Taped to the front, held by a magnet shaped like a fire helmet, was the wedding invitation. Cream card stock, gold lettering. A tiny embossed branch of olive leaves in the corner that made me smile when I first saw it. Olivia Olive Branch. I thought it was cute. The fancy script spelled out, "Together with their families." Asterisk I used to stop and read that line every morning like I had to convince myself I was still part of that word. Families, not just her mother and stepfather. All of us. The kettle whistled. I turned it off and poured hot water over the spoonful of instant, watching the swirl go from cloudy to dark. As I set the mug down, my phone buzzed on the counter. Olivia. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, suddenly 16 again, nervous before a big game like somehow this text was a test I had to pass. Dad, I need to ask you something. I smiled. Maybe she wanted me to bring something, or maybe even better, maybe she was nervous and just needed to hear my voice. Before I could hit call, another bubble popped up. Please don't come to the wedding today, it will just make things harder. For a second, I thought I'd misread it. My eyes aren't what they used to be, too many years squinting at fine print and flames. I brought the phone closer, held it at arm's length, brought it close again like that would change the words. It didn't. Please don't come to the wedding today, it will just make things harder. A hand went cold even though the mug was warm under my fingers. The house, which never felt exactly big, suddenly felt too quiet, like all the air had been sucked out and replaced with buzzing. I snorted a sharp, humorless sound. It had to be a joke, some weird autocorrect. I hit the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Come on, Liv, I muttered. Pick up. Tell me you meant to send that to someone else. Tell me you meant don't forget to come or something. The ringing stopped. Straight to voicemail, her recorded voice chirped through the speaker, cheerful, bright, the girl who used to call me for rides home from school. Hey, it's Liv, leave a message. The beep sounded, my mouth opened, but nothing came out. I hung up instead. A new text slid onto the screen. Please respect this, it's what Mom and I agreed. I don't want drama today, please don't make this about you. That last line hit harder than anything. I leaned back against the counter and closed my eyes. For a heartbeat, I wasn't 55 in a beige kitchen. I was 31 at a county fair, cotton candy stuck to my fingers, my daughter on my shoulders. She was 6 that summer. She'd wrapped her little hands in my hair for balance, sticky and warm. Don't move, Daddy, she'd ordered as we watched the fireworks explode over the rusted Ferris wheel. I want to see all of it. Yes, ma'am, I'd laughed, shifting her weight. You see okay up there? I see everything, she'd said, almost reverent. Then, after a pause, when I get married, can I sit on your shoulders then too? I chuckled. I think your dress might not like that. She'd leaned down, whispering in my ear like it was a secret. Then you can hold my hand and walk me instead, okay? Okay, ID said. I'll be there. That was the promise, simple, solid. Back then it felt like the kind of thing nothing could touch. Now my grown daughter was telling me not to even walk through the door. I opened my eyes and looked around my little place. The sagging couch, the stack of old firehouse t-shirts folded on a chair. The TV remote sitting on the armrest, right where I'd left it after falling asleep to some late-night baseball recap. My keys hanging on the hook by the door next to my faded ball cap. This was my life now, quiet, uncomplicated. No one nagging me about dishes in the sink. No one waiting for me when I came home. Just me, a middle-class paycheck, an aging Toyota, and the occasional game on TV to keep me company. And apparently that was all my daughter thought I should ever be. It didn't sound like her, not really. Olivia was many things, organized, opinionated, too hard on herself, but cruel. No, that tone, that sharpness, that was Karen, her mother. It's what Mom and I agreed. There it was, the hook under the words, Karen's voice in Olivia's mouth. They'd been a team for years now while I played the role of occasional visitor with a checkbook. I stared at the half-typed reply on my screen. If that's what you want, I'll stay away. My thumb hovered over the send button. Pride screamed at me to go. Shame hissed that showing up where I wasn't wanted would just make me look pathetic. A third voice, small but stubborn, whispered that this was my kid. My only daughter, my only shot at this day. If I stayed home, I'd never know what they said about me, what they told people, what lies I'd let harden into truth because I was too afraid to be inconvenient. I deleted the message, letter by letter, until the text box was empty again. Then I set the phone down, grabbed my keys off the hook, and shoved my feet into my boots. If I was going to be erased from my own daughter's wedding, I wanted to look the people holding the eraser in the eye and find out why. I wasn't always the guy no one wanted in the room. Once, I was just a tired dad doing overtime to keep the lights on. If you'd seen me 20 years ago, you wouldn't have picked me out of a crowd. I was one of 100 men in steel-toed boots and safety vests, putting in 12-hour shifts at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town. Big concrete box humming with forklifts and conveyor belts. No windows, no glory, just work. I started there right out of high school, first as a picker, then a forklift operator, then a shift lead. I was good at it. I didn't mind the noise or the repetition. There was something satisfying about seeing a line of pallets wrapped and ready, knowing you demoved a few tons of product with your own 2 hands. By the time Olivia was born, I'd finally made it into the office. Operations manager sounded fancier than it felt. Same building, same dust, just a collared shirt instead of a t-shirt and a little more paperwork to bring home. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom ranch on a quiet street back then. Brown shingles, small front yard, chain-link fence. I loved that house. I painted the nursery myself when Karen was pregnant. Yellow walls, little blue clouds. We didn't have much money, but we had a mortgage we could barely afford and a baby on the way, and it felt like the whole world was opening up. I picked up every extra shift I could get. Just for a few years, I told Karen. We get ahead, pay stuff down, then I'll cut back. At first she was on board. She'd send me off with a packed lunch and a kiss, tell me I was her hard-working man. We drove an old teal Ford Taurus with a dent in the bumper and took Olivia to the park on Sundays. We bought groceries with coupons. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Then our neighborhood started changing. New developments went up a few miles away. Bigger houses, brick fronts, three-car garages. The kind of places where landscapers showed up every week and the trash cans lived behind cute little fences instead of on the curb. Some of those people started showing up at Olivia's school. Kids with perfectly straight teeth and brand name everything. Moms with perfect hair and yoga pants that cost more than Karen's entire outfit. That's when the comments started. Tom down the street just traded his truck in for a new one, Karen would say while we were eating spaghetti at the wobbly kitchen table. Says the dealership gave him a great rate, maybe you should look into that. I'd twirl another forkful of pasta, ours runs fine. For now, she'd say, pointed, glancing at the Taurus parked crooked in our short driveway. You know, it wouldn't kill you to wear something other than warehouse boots and those old jeans to the company picnic. The Coles were there last year and they looked professional. I didn't know who the Coles were then, I'd find out later. When Olivia hit middle school, life got busier, band concerts, science fairs, soccer games. I went to as many as I could, but as many as I could was all. There was always another shipment behind schedule, another manager calling in sick, another memo about stepping up if you wanted to keep your position. Just one more shift, I'd tell myself, staring at my calendar. I'll make the next one. But sometimes the next one was the night a scheduler double booked a truck and I had to stay until midnight, or the morning after a pipe burst in one of the loading docks, or the day corporate dropped by unannounced to observe operations. Dad, you missed my solo, Olivia said once, standing in the doorway in her choir dress, mascara smudged a little at the corners. She was 13, old enough to understand schedules, too young to understand the way they can swallow you whole. I know, kiddo, I'm sorry. The line backed up and it's always something, she muttered. It's always work. She wasn't wrong, but it stung anyway. By the time she was 15, the cracks in my marriage weren't just hairline fractures, they were fault lines. I can't live like this anymore, Karen said one night. We were standing in the kitchen, dirty dishes in the sink, the TV murmuring from the living room. Olivia was upstairs, music leaking through her door. Like what? I asked, genuinely confused. We've got a roof. We've got food, we're okay. That's the problem, Jack, we're always just okay. She folded her arms, nails tapping against her elbow. I want more than watching you fall asleep in front of the TV in the same stained t-shirt every night. I want a life that doesn't revolve around your shifts and your overtime. I thought she meant she wanted more date nights, more time together. I didn't realize she meant more houses, cars, status. When the divorce papers came, I signed where my lawyer told me to sign. I wasn't a legal guy, I was a numbers and pallets guy. The one thing I insisted on was the house. Let me keep it, I said. I'll pay you out your half. The kids, Karen shook her head. They need stability, their school, their friends. You're the one leaving, the house should stay with us. Us meant her and the kids. I heard the subtext loud and clear. My lawyer pulled me aside. You can fight this, Jack, or you can make it clean, up to you. I thought about uprooting Olivia in the middle of high school. Thought about her junior year, her senior year, the college brochures already starting to show up in the mail. Give her the house, I said. I'll start over. So I moved into a one-bedroom apartment with beige walls and a view of the parking lot. I brought my recliner, my tools, and my box of pictures. I paid child support. When Olivia needed something for school, I paid extra. New cleats, new laptop, whatever. I didn't want her to feel the split in her life every time she opened her backpack. 6 months after the divorce was final, Karen introduced a friend at one of Olivia's games. Richard Cole, nice watch, nicer car, even nicer smile. He was a real estate developer, the kind of man who used words like portfolio and asset class in casual conversation. He lived in one of those big brick houses with the three-car garage and the professionally landscaped yard, the kind of place Karen had been eyeing for years when we drove past. By the next summer, Olivia was spending weekends at a country club pool and flying to Florida on spring break. Her Instagram filled up with pictures of resorts, white sand, and little umbrella drinks in the hands of her mom and Rich. Meanwhile, I learned how to cook for one and watched ball games alone in my beige living room. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter who had the bigger house, the nicer car, the flashier vacations. As long as my kids were cared for, I'd be okay. During the divorce, there'd been one meeting at Karen's lawyer's office where they put a thick stack of papers in front of me. Something about future estate planning and simplifying things for the children down the road. I'd skimmed the first page, saw words like trust and beneficiary, and my head had started to pound. Is this good for the kids? I asked. Karen's lawyer smiled. It just makes sure everything is clean and clear in the future. Karen said, Jack, just sign. I already did. So I did, page after page, signature after signature, thinking I was being a good father. A responsible ex-husband, making it clean. I didn't know those signatures would come back to haunt me on the day of my daughter's wedding. The first time I saw my daughter in a wedding dress, it wasn't in person. It was on someone else's phone. Megan's townhouse smelled like coffee and laundry detergent when I walked in. She lived on the other side of town in a duplex that looked a lot like mine, small yard, cracked driveway, paint peeling a little around the windows. Comfortable, not fancy, real. She opened the door before I could knock twice. You look like hell, she said by way of greeting. Morning to you too, I muttered. She stepped aside so I could come in, eyes flicking to the pressed shirt I'd actually ironed for once and the tie hanging loose around my neck. You're going. I'm driving that direction, I said. Haven't decided if I'm getting out of the truck yet. Megan snorted. Classic Jack, come on, coffee. Her living room was cluttered in the way of people who actually live in their houses, kids' drawings from her patients at the clinic, a half-finished knitting project on the arm of the couch, TV remote buried under a pile of mail. I'd always liked that about her place. It felt like life, not a showroom. She handed me a mug and watched me wrap my hands around it like she was my nurse instead of my little sister. So, she said finally, sinking into the armchair opposite me. You got the text. Yeah, my throat felt tight just thinking about it. Told me not to come, said it would make things harder. Harder for who? Megan demanded, her or Karen, trying to keep the picture perfect. I didn't answer, I didn't have to. Megan reached for her phone on the side table. You want to see what perfect looks like? I hesitated. Do I? She didn't wait for an answer. Her thumb flew across the screen and then she turned it toward me. There was Olivia framed in the harsh overhead lights of a country club banquet room, white dress, not the real one I guessed, but close enough. Simple, elegant, hair pinned back, veil clipped in place. She looked older than I remembered and somehow exactly the same. Her arm was linked with Richard's. He was in a dark suit, tan as ever, teeth movie star white even in the grainy photo. The caption under the picture, written by one of Karen's friends, made my stomach flip. Couldn't ask for a better dad to give her away tomorrow, so proud of this beautiful family. I swallowed hard, my thumb zoomed in on Olivia's face. She was smiling, not the goofy, wide-open smile she used to give me when I picked her up from school blasting the radio. This was smaller, tighter, like she knew a camera was on her and she wasn't allowed to blink. Where'd you get this? I asked, my voice rough. Facebook, Megan said. Karen's crowd-has been posting all morning. Rehearsal, dinner, champagne toast, the whole 9 yards. No one told me there was a rehearsal, I said. It came out flatter than I intended. Megan's eyebrows went up. You didn't know? I shook my head. Found out yesterday when Kyle at work showed me a tag. Hey, your girl's getting married at the club, huh? I let out a breath. I thought maybe I got left off an email by mistake. She snorted. They don't make those kinds of mistakes, Jack. Not when there's a photographer involved. Another swipe of her thumb, another photo. Olivia standing between Karen and Richard, all three holding champagne flutes. Richard's hand was on her shoulder in that proprietary way that made my skin crawl. This caption was worse. So happy to see our girl starting her new life with the Coles. She's in the best hands. Our girl, the best hands, Megan repeated, rolling her eyes. Yeah, the ones holding all the money. I kept staring at the screen. It wasn't just that Richard was in the pictures. It was that he fit so neatly into the frame where I used to be, like the whole world had agreed to crop me out and pretend somebody else had always been there. I busted my back for that family, I said quietly. Missed birthdays, anniversaries, scraped together every extra shift I could, and now some guy with a golf handicap gets to be dad of the year because he can pick up a bar tab and wear a suit that fits. Megan leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You're not wrong to be angry, but listen to me, Jack, they're not just using his golf swing. They're using his money and his name, that's all this is. I looked up. What's that supposed to mean? It means, she said, jabbing a finger toward the phone, Karen has always wanted to be Mrs. Somebody. First it was Mrs. Operations Manager. Now it's Mrs. Real Estate Mogul. She likes what Richard does for her social calendar, and she likes what it does to you. I took a sip of coffee that had gone lukewarm. Olivia's old enough to know the difference. Is she? Megan countered. She was 15 when the divorce happened, 15 when Karen started writing the story for her. Your father's a good guy, he just can't provide. I'm the one who stuck around, all that garbage. I rubbed my forehead. I don't want Liv caught in the middle. She's already there. Megan's voice softened. But that doesn't mean you step out of the picture. That just means you don't let them pretend you never existed. She hesitated, then added, this isn't just about a selfie at a rehearsal, Jack. I heard Karen talking at the grocery store last week. I frowned. About what? I was in the next aisle, she said. She didn't see me. She was on the phone with somebody. I only caught pieces, but Megan mimicked Karen's breezy tone. After the wedding, everything will be squared away. Olivia's future is locked in with the Cole money. We won't have to worry about any complications from Jack. Complications, I repeated slowly. Megan nodded. That stuck with me. People don't use that word by accident, not about the man who paid the mortgage for 20 years. I leaned back on the couch, feeling like the floor had tilted a few degrees. Complications. Like I was a bad credit score, a stain on a white carpet, something to be managed, not a father. You think this is just about hurt feelings, big brother? Megan reached across the coffee table and put her hand on my arm. Jack, something bigger is going on. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number, local area code. I glanced at Megan. She raised an eyebrow. Well, answer it. I slid my thumb across the screen and lifted it to my ear. Hello, Mr. Mercer, a calm professional voice, male, maybe early 60s. My name is Alan Price. I'm calling from Price & Lowell, attorneys at law. I believe we're both connected to your daughter's wedding today. My stomach dropped. Why, I asked slowly, is a lawyer calling me about my daughter's wedding? I almost let it go to voicemail. If I had, I might have lost more than just a place in the front row. Mr. Mercer, the voice repeated, calm, precise, the kind of tone you hear from people who bill by the hour. Yeah, I said slowly, this is Jack, thank you. My name is Alan Price. I'm an attorney with Price & Lowell here in town. I apologize for the unexpected call. I just need to confirm a couple of details for my file. You are the father of Olivia Mercer. My hand tightened around the phone. Yes, I am. And your date of birth is? He asked, reading it off like he already knew the answer. I confirmed it, my eyes flicking to Megan. She was watching my face like it was a news broadcast. Thank you, Alan said. There was a brief, polite pause, like he was choosing his next words carefully. Mr. Mercer, I'm calling in connection with a scheduled signing today, immediately following your daughter's wedding ceremony. Signing. I glanced at the wedding invitation on Megan's fridge. It didn't say anything about that. I thought today was just the wedding. For most people it will be, he said. In this case, I've been retained to execute some documents related to your daughter's inheritance structure. Inheritance? I let out a short, humorless laugh. I don't know who told you that, but I'm not leaving her anything worth hiring a lawyer over. I've got a pension and an old truck. This is not about what you're leaving her, Mr. Mercer, he replied. It pertains to the Cole family trust. Specifically, marital property allocations, a pre-wedding agreement, and some waivers related to any potential future claim from prior family arrangements. The words slid over me like ice water. Waivers, I repeated. Future claim from what? There was a faint rustle of papers on his end. As I understand it, this is a standard process the Cole family undertakes when one of their heirs marries someone from outside their existing estate plans. They wish to ensure there are no complications down the line from former spouses or outstanding obligations. That word again, complications, my brain snagged on another phrase he'd used. Prior family arrangements, I said slowly. What does that mean, my divorce? In part, yes, Alan said. And any connected financial or estate agreements. There are references in this draft to previously executed disclaimers involving you, your ex-wife, and future beneficiaries. I felt my stomach drop. A memory flickered, the thick stack of papers in Corinne's lawyer's office, the future estate planning documents I'd signed without understanding, trusting that everyone at the table cared about my kids as much as I did. I told myself then it was just paperwork, words on a page that didn't change who I was to my daughter. Mr. Price, I said, clearing my throat, what exactly are you asking my daughter to sign? On the other end, he exhaled slowly. That's where things become delicate. My primary duty is to the clients who hired me. However, his voice dropped a notch. I've also been practicing long enough to know when something doesn't sit right. I waited. I've been asked, Alan continued, to have your daughter execute a document today that includes specific language about her financial relationship to you. It struck me as unusual. When I realized you had not been informed, I felt you should at least know it exists. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What does it say about me? I can't quote it verbatim without breaching privilege, he said, but I can tell you the effect of the language. The document essentially assumes you will have no future claim, voice, or standing in any financial matter related to Olivia, now or in the future. So, I tried to keep my tone even. I've never asked her for money, I've never planned to. That's not all, Alan said quietly. It also includes characterizations of you as financially unreliable and effectively estranged from your daughter. Those are not strictly legal terms, they are persuasive ones. Put together, they paint a picture that supports routing your existing family estate arrangements away from Olivia's direct control and into the Cole structure. I sank down onto Megan's couch without meaning to. Financially unreliable, I echoed. I paid every support check on time, I've never missed rent. I don't have a single missed payment on my record. I saw that, Alan said, which is partly why this concerned me. The numbers in your file don't match the narrative in this draft. I raised a question with Mr. Cole's primary counsel, but his response was that this was family business and the cleanest solution going forward. My jaw tightened. Cleanest solution, like I was a stain again, something to be scrubbed out of the story. Why are you telling me this? I asked, if you work for them. Because, he said simply, I took an oath a long time ago to serve the law, not just people with large bank accounts. Your name is all over these documents, Mr. Mercer. And no one thought to invite you to the conversation. That didn't feel right. Megan's hand landed on my shoulder, solid and warm. Alan continued, I can't advise you directly unless you retain me. What I can say is that once this document is signed, unwinding it will be significantly more difficult. I ran a hand over my face. My skin felt tight. You're meeting them today, when? Immediately after the ceremony, he said, in a side room at the venue. I stared at the floor, at the worn patch of carpet where Megan's coffee table legs had left grooves. Suddenly the text from Olivia, the Facebook photos, Corinne's grocery store bragging, all of it clicked into a new shape. They hadn't just wanted me absent from the pictures, they wanted me erased on paper too. Mr. Price, I said quietly, thank you for calling. You're welcome, Mr. Mercer. There was a pause. Whatever you decide, I hope today goes better than it's been arranged. We hung up. For a long moment I just sat there while the refrigerator hummed and Megan watched my face, waiting. As I finally pushed myself up from the couch, one thought burned hotter than the rest. They didn't just want me out of the room, they wanted me erased legally too, and my daughter was about to sign the paper that finished the job. I drove past the exit twice before I finally took it. Cowards turn around, fathers show up. My old truck rattled a little as I eased it back into the right lane. The freeway signs loomed overhead, one pointing toward the city, the other toward the kind of neighborhoods that have security gates and landscaping budgets. The invitation's directions were still folded in the cup holder, the gold letters already starting to rub off at the corners. I must have picked it up and put it back down a dozen times that morning. Megan's words, Alan's voice, Olivia's text, they all swirled around in my head like loose change. Please don't come to the wedding, it will just make things harder. For who? I thought again, gripping the wheel. For her, for Karen trying to put on a flawless show, or for the people who decided I was a complication they could clean up with a couple of signatures. Traffic thinned out the farther I got from my side of town. The strip malls disappeared. The gas stations got fancier, the houses bigger and farther apart. I passed a billboard for some private school with kids in matching blazers smiling at the camera like they'd never known what it felt like to want anything. The exit for the venue flashed by on my right. I stayed in my lane. Just go home, the small, tired voice in my head muttered. Watch the game, let it be, she told you what she wants. Yeah, but whose words were those, really? My hands turned the wheel almost on their own, looping around on the next off-ramp. I circled back, took the exit, merged, and kept going straight. Second time passed, I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. My palms were slick against the steering wheel. 55 years old, ex-firefighter, warehouse manager, survived more near misses than I could count, and somehow the idea of walking into my own daughter's wedding scared me more than any house fire ever had. If I went, Karen would say I was trying to ruin her day, that I was making it about me, just like Olivia's text had thrown at me. If I stayed away, my daughter would sign something that turned every lie Karen ever told about me into legal fact. Financially unreliable, estranged, a non-entity. What kind of father are you if you let that happen? Another voice shot back. I took the next exit, pulled into a gas station, and parked by the air pump. I killed the engine and just sat there, breathing. Across the lot, a minivan pulled in. Late model, clean, a little dent in the back bumper. A guy about my age got out, joggers and a faded college hoodie. He walked around to the passenger side and slid open the door. A little girl tumbled out, 6, maybe 7, hair everywhere, pink dress bunched at her waist. She looked like she'd lost a fight with a car seat. Hold still, kiddo, the man said, laughing. He dug around in the glove compartment, came up with a plastic headband with tiny fake flowers on it. She crossed her arms. It's itchy. I know, he knelt, gently untangling hair from her face, setting the band just so. But your mom worked hard on this outfit. We can make it 5 minutes, right? The girl huffed, then nodded. Do I look pretty? He leaned back, gave her a once-over and grinned. You look perfect. She beamed, grabbed his hand, and they walked toward the convenience store together. I watched them go, a lump rising in my throat. For a second, I saw myself in that parking lot 20 years ago, trying to wrestle Olivia's wild hair into a ponytail before a school picture, fumbling, clumsy, but trying. I wasn't a perfect father. I'd worked too many shifts, missed too many recitals, said maybe next time more than I should have, but I'd shown up as much as I could. I'd kept trying even when the door kept moving farther away. And I sure as hell wasn't the villain Karen had been painting for the last decade. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the text thread with Alan Price. My thumbs hovered for a second, then I typed, I'm going to the wedding. If there's any document with my name on it, don't let her sign until I'm there. I hit send before I could overthink it. The reply came faster than I expected. Understood, no lecture, no warning, just that one word, solid as a brick. I sat there for another beat, watching the gas station traffic shuffle in and out, a delivery truck. A teenager pumping gas into a beat-up sedan, regular people living regular lives. Then I started my engine. The road to the venue curved past a golf course, then up into the kind of neighborhood where the houses were hidden behind stone walls and tall hedges. The GPS on my phone chirped gentle directions. I turned onto the estate road, tires crunching over perfect gravel. Wrought iron gates stood open, white balloons tied to the posts. Beyond them, I could see a glimpse of white tents, a sweep of green lawn, cars gleaming in the afternoon light. As I rolled up to the entrance, a young guy in a black vest and bow tie stepped forward, holding a clipboard. He forced a professional smile as I lowered my window. Good afternoon, sir. This event is private. Name, please. Jack Mercer, I said. His eyes flicked down to the list on his board, then back up to me. The smile faltered just a little. He shifted his weight, suddenly looking very young. I was told, he said carefully, specifically not to let you in. I'd been turned away from bars when I was underage. I'd been turned away from jobs I needed, but never from my own child's wedding. The valet stepped squarely in front of my truck like he'd been trained for this exact moment, clipboard against his chest. Polite smile glued to his face, but his eyes kept darting to the driveway behind me where a line of luxury cars was starting to form. Mr. Mercer, he said, like the name tasted wrong. I'm really sorry, sir, but I was given specific instructions. You're not on the admission list. Beyond him, I could see the scene unfolding like something from a magazine. White tents staked into perfectly manicured grass, rows of white chairs facing a floral arch, a string quartet under a smaller tent, bows moving in slow unison. Their music floated up the hill soft and polished, and between my truck and all of that, one kid in a vest telling me I didn't belong. I put the truck in park but didn't kill the engine. I'm not a +1, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm the bride's father, he swallowed. Yes, sir, that's why I was told. Told what? I asked, even though I already knew. His eyes dropped to his clipboard again like the paper might rescue him. That if you arrived, I was to, politely inform you that the event is private and direct you elsewhere. Elsewhere, I repeated, like home. He looked torn between his script and basic human decency. Sir, I don't want any trouble, I'm just doing my job. Yeah, I said quietly, I remember what that's like. For a second, I thought about just throwing it in reverse and backing down that pretty gravel road. Let them have their picture-perfect day without me. Let Olivia sign whatever story they'd written about me into law. Then I thought about my father signing papers he didn't fully understand before he died, about Alan Price's voice on the phone, about Karen saying I was a complication. I killed the engine and opened the door. I'm not here to make trouble for you, kid, I told the valet as I stepped out. But I'm not leaving either. Get me whoever's in charge of this thing. The coordinator, the manager, somebody who can make a decision. He hesitated. They told you not to let me in, I cut in. Okay, you've done your part, now go get the person who gave that order. He looked over his shoulder toward the tents, then back at me. Finally, he nodded and jogged off down the path. I stood there next to my truck, hands shoved in my pockets, feeling the stairs prickle the back of my neck. A black Mercer slid past and pulled into the circular drive, music thumping faintly behind its closed windows. A woman in a navy dress and 2 high heels stepped out, clutching a gift bag. She glanced at me, then away, like she was afraid being seen looking at me might transfer whatever I had. The quartet shifted to another piece, something delicate and classical. I could pick out Olivia's taste in it. She'd always liked the pretty melancholy songs when she was little. Gravel crunched behind me. I turned to see a woman in a fitted black dress and a headset walking toward us, tablet in hand. Late 20s, maybe 30, professional smile, eyes sharp. I'm Leela, the event coordinator, she said. Is there a problem here? The valet took a small step back, relieved. This is Mr. Mercer, he said. The bride's father. Her expression didn't change, but her posture did, just a fraction, a tiny tightening at the corners of her mouth. Mr. Mercer, she repeated. I see. You see what? I asked. She glanced past me at the waiting cars, then back. Today is an extremely carefully planned event. The bride and her mother have been very clear about wanting to avoid any complications. There it was again, that word. I'm not here to cause a scene, I said, keeping my voice low and even. I didn't come to storm the altar. I came because I heard my daughter's signing something about me today, legally, after the ceremony. Her eyes flicked to mine, really focused now. Where did you hear that? From the attorney who's supposed to oversee it, I said. Alan Price. That made her blink. The name meant something to her. I'm guessing you've seen him around, I added. Older guy, gray hair, carries his briefcase like it's handcuffed to him. She pressed her lips together. Mr. Price has been in contact with our planning team regarding the post-ceremony schedule, yes. Then you know this isn't just about seating charts and centerpieces, I said. Someone up there wants my daughter to sign a paper that rewrites who I am to her. I'm not asking to give a speech. I'm asking to be in the building when she's asked to erase me. Leela shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The professional mask slipped for half a second, and I saw the human underneath. I was told, she started. I know what you were told, I interrupted gently. You were told I'm an embarrassing ex who might ruin the aesthetic, maybe worse. You were told the story Karen's been selling for years. Her eyes widened just slightly at my use of Karen's first name. I'm not that man, I said. And if I am, let me be the one to prove it, not a line in a document she signs without understanding. We stood there in the gravel, the music floating between us, the smell of roses and expensive perfume drifting on the breeze. Leela looked back toward the tents, then at the rows of cars. Finally, she sighed. I can't just unilaterally overrule the family, she said. But the groom is also my client. He's the one who insisted your name be on the programs in the first place. I felt something flicker in my chest. He did, she nodded almost imperceptibly. Give me 2 minutes, I'm going to call inside and check with him directly. Thank you, I said. She stepped away, tapping her headset, murmuring into the mic as she walked. Valet hovered by the edge of the driveway, pretending to manage traffic while obviously listening. A couple in their 50s walked past us toward the venue, the man straightening his tie as they went. They didn't recognize me, so they didn't bother to lower their voices. Can you believe her real dad's not even allowed inside? The man chuckled. Richard must be thrilled, one less eyesore in the photos. His companion laughed, light and cruel. Well, you can't have an old factory guy ruining the aesthetic, right? This place screams money. They swept by without giving me a second glance. For a moment, humiliation burned hot in my chest, the kind that makes you want to disappear into the pavement. Then under it, something harder took root, anger, not the wild shouting. The deep, steady kind that comes when you finally see the full picture and realize you've been letting everyone else color it in for you. I straightened up, wiped my palms casually on my pants, and waited. Leela came back faster than I expected. Her face was different now, less guarded, more surprised. Mr. Mercer, she said, I just spoke with the groom, and I asked. She took a breath. His exact words were, if that's Olivia's father, let him in, we're not starting without him. When the groom chooses you over the bride's mother, you know there's more going on than cake flavors and flower arrangements. Leela led me along a gravel path that hugged the side of the main tent, away from the white chairs and the growing murmur of guests. She insisted we use a side entrance to minimize distraction. Translation, slipped the embarrassment in through the back door. We passed under a row of string lights, bare bulbs not yet turned on, and then the estate opened up in front of me. I'd seen nice places in magazines. This looked like someone had ripped one of those pages out and dropped it on a hill. Lush gardens, every hedge trimmed within an inch of its life. White chairs set up in perfect rows, each one draped with a tiny bit of greenery. A floral arch at the front, heavy with roses and something that smelled expensive. An actual harpist had joined the string quartet now, her fingers moving like she was afraid to make a sound out of place. An expensive-looking photographer in a black vest was snapping pre-ceremony shots near the edge of the lawn, barking soft, practiced instructions. Chin up, that's it, eyes here, laugh like I just told you something funny. And there, near a stone path lined with lanterns, was my daughter. Even from a distance, she knocked the wind out of me. The dress was simple and clean, nothing like the puffy confections you see on billboards. Fitted through the waist, skirt falling straight to the ground with just enough flair to look like it was floating when she turned. Her dark hair was pinned up, a few loose curls framing her face, veil clipped in place. She looked older, she looked like a kid playing dress-up. She looked like every age I'd ever seen her, layered on top of each other. Corinne stood on one side of her in a sequined navy gown, hand resting possessively on Olivia's arm. Richard took up the other side, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of something golden. They looked like an ad for something, perfume, watches, a lifestyle I'd never been invited to sample. Corinne saw me first. Her face went pale, then flushed red so fast it was like someone had flipped a switch. Her mouth tightened into a hard line. Olivia followed Corinne's gaze. Our eyes met for half a second. Hers were shiny wide. She looked away almost immediately. Richard just raised his eyebrows and took a slow sip of his drink. Leela touched my elbow. Wait here, she whispered. Please, I'll help manage this. She left me standing by a cluster of potted plants while she crossed the lawn toward the trio. I watched her lean into Corinne, murmuring something. Corinne's lips moved sharply. Leela added something else, probably Ethan's words, the groom's condition, no Jack, no ceremony. Corinne turned, laser-focused on me now. She handed her glass to Richard like she was passing off a weapon and marched across the grass, the heels of her shoes sinking into the lawn with every angry step. You had one job, Jack, she hissed as soon as she was within range. Her voice was low for now. One thing, stay away, but you couldn't even do that, could you? I got a call from a lawyer, I said quietly, about a document with my name on it. You forgot to mention that part when you were sending please don't come texts. Her jaw clenched. That is none of your business. It is when it rewrites who I am to my daughter on paper, I shot back. When it calls me estranged and financially unreliable, that's my business. She glanced around us, checking to see if anyone was listening. A few bridesmaids were pretending to fix their hair a little too close for it to be an accident. Keep your voice down, she snapped. You're not going to ruin this for her, do you understand me? Olivia had drifted a few steps closer, pulled along by the gravity of the argument. She hugged her bouquet like it was a life raft. She still wouldn't quite look at me. Liv, I said, softer, is this really what you want? For me to be out there in the parking lot while you sign something like that without knowing the whole story? Her fingers tightened on the flowers. Dad, I don't want drama today, she said, barely above a whisper. We talked about this, me and Mom and Richard. It's just paperwork. It's to protect you, Corinne cut in smoothly. From your father's mistakes, from any mess he might make of things later, we are being responsible, something you've never understood, Jack. I laughed once, short and sharp. Responsible, that what we're calling it now. Jack, Olivia said, finally looking up. Her eyes were glassy, torn. Please, I just want today to go smoothly. Before I could answer, another voice joined us. Then maybe we should stop lying to people we love on their wedding day, Ethan said. He walked up from the direction of the tent, suit jacket unbuttoned, tie still hanging loose around his neck. He looked calm, but there was steel under it. Ethan, Corinne said, smoothing her expression into something sweeter. We're just dealing with an unexpected visitor. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes were on me. Mr. Mercer, I nodded. Jack. He stuck out his hand. I'm Ethan. It's nice to finally meet you. Corinne's nostrils flared. Ethan, she said through her teeth. We agreed she deserved to be happy, he said, turning to her. I did not agree to cut her father out of her life on the same day we promised to build a new one. Her real father is standing right over there, Corinne snapped, gesturing toward Richard. The man who's actually been present. Ethan's jaw worked. He looked like he wanted to say something he'd regret. Instead, he took a breath and picked his words like a surgeon picks instruments. Mrs. Cole, he said, voice clear but controlled, this is Olivia's father. He has every right to be here. For a moment, no one spoke. The harpist plucked a few hesitant notes in the distance, filling the silence. Corinne recovered first. We've been over this, she hissed at him. You don't understand the history. Jack brings chaos wherever he goes. Do you really want that in front of your parents, your business partners, the Cole name? Ethan looked at me, then at Olivia. What I want, he said, is for my wife to not spend our whole marriage wondering if she betrayed her own father to make things easier for everyone else. That landed like a stone dropping into deep water. Corinne opened her mouth, shut it, opened it again. We are not having this conversation 10 minutes before the ceremony, she snapped. Fine, he can sit. She turned to me, eyes blazing. You sit in the back. You do not speak. You do not interfere. You do not so much as look at that lawyer when we sign after the ceremony. Do you understand me, Jack? No, I said. Her head snapped back like I'd slapped her. No, she repeated. No, I said again, quieter but twice as firm. This time I'm not staying quiet. Her mouth pressed into a hard, thin line. For a second, I saw real panic flicker in her eyes. Not because of me exactly, but because if I spoke, her version of me might crack. Before she could answer, Leela's voice came over the small speakers staked in the grass. Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to begin. Please take your seats. Guests started shuffling toward the chairs, smoothing dresses and straightening ties. The musicians picked up the tempo. Somewhere, an usher called out, family of the bride this way. Corinne shot me one last warning look, then grabbed Olivia's arm. Come on, she said. We're not postponing this because your father suddenly remembered he exists. Ethan stepped to Olivia's other side. She stood frozen for half a beat, eyes flicking between us, her mother, her groom, her father. Then the three of them turned toward the aisle, and I realized we were all about to walk out there and face everyone with the truth sitting just behind the flowers, waiting. I watched another man walk my daughter down the aisle while I sat in the third row, smiling like it wasn't killing me. The music changed, something slow and sweeping, and everyone rose to their feet in one smooth motion, a wave of expensive fabric and perfume. The string quartet hit their marks perfectly. The harp added a little shimmer. At the back of the aisle, Olivia appeared. For a moment, everything else went blurry, just her framed in the white of the tent and the green of the garden beyond. The dress, the veil, the bouquet clutched in both hands. Her face pale and beautiful and terrified in a way I recognized all the way from where I was sitting. Then Richard stepped into the frame and offered her his arm. He did it like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. Smooth, confident, the way a man does when he's used to walking into boardrooms knowing everyone is already on his side. Olivia looped her arm through his the way the photographer had probably told her to. From where I sat, third row, end seat on the aisle, I could hear the whispers. "Oh, look at them, such a beautiful family. Richard must be so proud." Proud, that word tasted bitter. My program said parents of the bride, Karen Cole and Jack Mercer. My name was there in print at least. But in real life, in this moment that would be captured in 1,000 photos, the man beside my daughter was the one who'd married her mother after all the hard work was done. I shifted in my seat, feeling every glance slide off me. A couple I vaguely recognized from school events years ago looked at me, then quickly looked away, like making eye contact might be rude or contagious. I thought about all the events I'd missed. The third grade spelling bee I'd only heard about after the fact because a truck had broken down on my shift. The middle school band concert where she'd had a clarinet solo I'd listened to on a grainy phone video Megan recorded from the back row. The soccer game where I'd arrived just in time to see her taking off her cleats, mud on her shins, shoulders tight because she'd scored the winning goal and I'd missed it. Then I thought about the ones I'd fought to be at. The night shift I'd begged someone to cover so I could catch her high school graduation. I'd made it halfway through the ceremony, sliding into the bleachers in my work boots, catching her eye just as they called her name. The way her face had lit up when she saw me, even from yards away. "Dad, you made it," she'd said afterward, cap crooked, diploma in hand. "I told you I would," ID said, out of breath, heart pounding. Now I watched her walk on someone else's arm. She kept her eyes forward at first, lips pressed together. Halfway down the aisle, though, she glanced sideways. Not toward the camera flashes, not toward Karen, but toward the third row on the left, toward me. For a fraction of a second, our eyes met. There was something there, guilt, fear, maybe even apology, before she looked away again, blinking hard. It hurt, of course it did, it burned all the way down. But underneath the hurt was something else, something I hadn't expected to feel so strongly. I wanted her to be happy. Not in the glossy, Instagram way Karen cared about. In the real way. Laugh with your mouth open, sleep through the night, know you're safe kind of way. If Ethan could give her that, I could live with whatever role I had to stand in while she got there. As long as they didn't ask me to sign off on a lie about who I'd been to her. At the front, the officiant smiled his wedding smile. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I forced my shoulders to loosen, my jaw to unclench. I even managed a small, polite smile. Pictures would be taken no matter what I did. Might as well not look like a man at a funeral. The ceremony was beautiful. Of course it was. They'd hired people to make sure it was. The readings were just the right length. The jokes landed. Olivia's voice shook at first, but steadied as she recited her vows, eyes never leaving Ethan S. "I choose you," she said, "to build a life with even when it's hard, to be honest with even when the truth is complicated." That word again, complicated. Ethan slipped the ring box from his pocket when his turn came. He took a breath, glanced out over the guests, and then back at Olivia. "Olivia," he said, "you are the bravest person I know. You've lived between worlds your whole life and managed to hold them both without letting them break you. Today I promise to do the same, to build a home with you that doesn't erase where we came from, no matter how complicated that is." There was a little ripple in the crowd. A few people shifted. Most just smiled, thinking it was a pretty line. I heard what he was saying. He was drawing a line in the sand without raising his voice, saying in front of God and everybody that her past, our past, wasn't something to be scrubbed out for the sake of a cleaner picture. The officiant cleared his throat, a little "Well," he said, recovering his patter, "that was lovely. Rings." The best man fumbled the box open. The photographer moved in closer, camera clicking like a heartbeat. As Ethan took Olivia's left hand, a memory flashed through my mind so sharp it almost made me flinch. Olivia at 12, legs dangling off the tailgate of my truck, chewing on a straw from a milkshake. "Close your eyes," ID said, pulling a small box from my pocket. "Dad, if this is another keychain." "It's not a keychain," I'd laughed. "Hold out your hand." She'd obeyed, rolling her eyes for show. I'd placed the tiny silver ring in her palm. "It's just a little thing," I'd told her. "But when you look at it, I want you to remember one thing, no matter what happens, Dad's here, even if I'm not in the room. Even if I'm late, I'm here." She'd slipped it on her finger too big by half. "It'll fall off," she'd protested. "Then we'll get it sized," ID said. "You're not done growing yet." Now I looked at her left hand as Ethan slid the wedding band onto her finger. No silver ring, of course not, I thought. She's a grown woman in a white dress, not a kid in a hoodie. The band was beautiful, simple gold, small diamond. Then as she turned her head, I saw it. Just at the base of her throat, above the neckline of her dress, a thin silver chain glinted in the afternoon light. Something small and familiar rested against her skin under the fabric. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was everything. I let myself believe for 1 second that she hadn't thrown every part of me away. "May kiss the bride," the officiant announced. They did. People clapped. Someone whistled. The music swelled again as they turned to face the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant boomed, "for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Cole." Everyone stood, applause, cheers, confetti from somewhere. Olivia's smile was real now, wide and bright as they walked back up the aisle. As they passed the third row, Karen leaned in close to her, lips almost brushing her ear. She didn't realize I could see the words form. "Remember," she whispered, "we sign everything before the reception, before he has a chance to ruin it." Olivia's smile faltered just a hair. She nodded, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye that had nothing to do with joy. The people around me kept clapping, kept smiling, kept tossing rose petals like nothing was wrong. I felt the chair under me, felt the program in my hands, felt my heartbeat settle into a new rhythm. Then I stood up. I was done sitting. If you've never watched someone try to sell your relationship with your own child, I don't recommend it. The reception tent buzzed behind us, glasses clinking, waiters gliding between tables, the DJ testing sound levels. But in the small side room Leela led us into, the noise was muffled, like someone had put a pillow over the party. It was one of those multi-purpose estate rooms, too nice to be called an office, too plain to be a ballroom. Neutral walls, big window overlooking the garden, one polished wooden table in the center with 6 chairs around it. Waiting at the head of the table was Alan Price. He stood when we walked in, gray suit, white shirt, simple tie. His briefcase sat open on the table, a thick stack of paper laid out in front of him, corners squared like he'd measured them. "Congratulations, Olivia," he said with a small, genuine smile. "Thank you," she murmured, fingers still wrapped around her bouquet like she hadn't decided where to put it yet. Ethan slid his hand into hers. Karen and Richard flanked them, moving as a unit. I followed last and stayed by the door. Alan's eyes flicked to me. There was the smallest nod of acknowledgement, then he schooled his face back to professional neutral. Karen noticed the glance, her expression tightened. "We don't need him in here," she said. "This is a private matter." "It's my private matter," Olivia said, surprising all of us. Her voice was soft, but there was a thread of steel in it. "If Dad wants to understand what I'm signing about him, he can stay." Karen's head snapped toward her. "Olivia," Richard put a hand on Karen's arm. "It's fine," he said smoothly. "The more transparency, the better, right, Alan?" Alan cleared his throat. "I always encourage clients to be fully informed," he said carefully. "Shall we sit?" We took our places around the table. Olivia and Ethan together on one side, Karen and Richard opposite them, Alan at the head. I pulled out the chair closest to the door and sat down slowly, like the wrong move might set off a trap. The document on the table was thick. Dozens of pages clipped together at the top, tabs and sticky notes bristling from the edges. Alan rested his fingertips on it like it might buck him off if he didn't keep contact. "As we discussed previously," he began, looking at Karen and Richard, "this is the post-nuptial family arrangement for Olivia and Ethan. Its primary purpose is to clarify how Olivia's marital property rights intersect with the existing Cole family trust documents." He turned to Olivia. "In simpler terms, this lays out what assets are considered part of your shared estate with Ethan, what remains separate, and how certain future inheritances will be handled." Olivia nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "that sounds reasonable. For the most part, it is standard," Alan said. "However, there are several clauses that are more specific to your situation." His gaze slid briefly to me, then back to the paper. He flipped a few pages, then tapped one with his index finger. "Here, for example, this section addresses prior family obligations and relationships. It states that for the purposes of future estate planning, your father, Mr. Mercer, is considered effectively estranged and financially unreliable." The room went very still. "What does that mean legally?" I asked, my voice low. Alan didn't flinch. "It means that any prior expectations, understandings, or potential inheritances involving you and Olivia are being treated as null. Olivia, by signing this, would be waiving any claim or say over assets tied to your side of the family, now or in the future." Olivia blinked. I don't understand. I don't have any claim to anything of Dad's. He's not rich." Karen jumped in quickly. "Sweetheart, this is just language to protect you from any messes he might make. If he ever filed for bankruptcy or got sued, they couldn't come after your share of the Cole assets. That's all it is." "Bankruptcy?" I repeated, stunned. "I don't have any debt. It's hypothetical," Karen said, waving a jeweled hand. "Lawyers have to think of every scenario." Alan cleared his throat again. "Respectfully, Mrs. Cole, the wording here goes beyond hypothetical protection. It also sets a narrative. It states as fact that Mr. Mercer has been inconsistent in financial support and is largely uninvolved in Olivia's life." I felt something hot rise in my chest. "That's a lie." Karen shot me a glare. "You've missed plenty, Jack. Don't act like—" "I've never missed a support payment," I said, louder this time. "Not once. I have no debt beyond my truck and my townhouse. I've never asked Olivia for a dime, not during the divorce, not ever." Everyone looked at Alan. He adjusted his glasses. "From the records I reviewed," he said slowly, "that is correct. Mr. Mercer's payment history is consistent. His credit report is stable. Modest but responsible." Olivia's eyes flicked to me, then to her mother. "Mom," Karen's smile was tight, "we're not talking about receipts," she said. "We're talking about stability, about who actually shows up. Money isn't the only kind of reliability." Which is why this language struck me as excessive, Alan said. These terms don't just protect the Cole estate from potential entanglements. They also make it quite difficult for Mr. Mercer to leave anything to Olivia in the future without it being funneled through or at least affected by the Cole trust structure. Ethan's brows knit. So if her dad wanted to, I don't know, leave her his house someday, this would, what, complicate that? In certain tax and asset shielding scenarios, yes, Alan said. It would give the Cole trustees significant influence over how any such bequests are treated. Richard leaned back, spreading his hands. This is just smart planning, he said. Consolidation, efficiency, why have 100 little accounts when you can have one strong structure? Olivia becomes part of this family now. It makes sense that everything aligns under that umbrella. At the cost of pretending I don't exist, I said. Richard's eyes cooled. You exist, Jack, you're just not relevant to this level of planning. Olivia flinched. Alan let the silence sit for a moment, then spoke softly. When I first reviewed this draft, I flagged those sections, he admitted. Particularly the phrases estranged and financially irresponsible. I suggested toning them down or separating the factual statements from the legal function. And we told you, Richard said, a hint of warning in his tone, that this language reflects our experience and our preferences. You're our attorney, you implement our wishes. Alan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That is correct, he said, to a point. He turned back to Olivia. Ms. Mercer, excuse me, Ms. Cole, he corrected himself. This document affects not just your access to the Cole Trust, but your standing in any future matters related to your father. It will be much harder, if not impossible, to argue later that you and he share a close ongoing relationship after signing something that states the opposite as legal fact. Olivia looked pale. Her fingers were white on the bouquet stems. Why didn't you tell me that? She asked Karen. Karen bristled. Because I didn't want to stress you out before your wedding, and because it's technical, you don't need to drown in paperwork. That's why we have lawyers. This is just formalizing what already is. Your father hasn't been involved, not really. I laughed, but it came out choked. Not involved. I may not have season tickets to your charity galas, Karen, but I've been there as much as you'd let me. You shut doors and then blame me for being outside. Ethan shifted, looking between us. I saw some of this language in the email, he said to Alan. It bothered me. That's why I told Leela to let Mr. Mercer in if he showed up. It didn't feel right to lock him out and then have Liv sign something declaring him a ghost. Karen's head snapped toward him. You went behind my back. No, he said calmly. I refused to go behind hers. He squeezed Olivia's hand. Alan watched them, then slowly closed the folder over the stack of papers. His fingers lingered on the cover for a moment. Mr. Mercer, he said, looking straight at me now. There's something else you haven't been told, something your ex-wife failed to mention when she had you sign those earlier documents years ago. The air in the room thickened. Olivia's head jerked up. Karen's face went very still. Everyone went silent. When the lawyer said my father's name, I realized this wasn't just about spite. It was about money I didn't even know existed. Alan rested both hands on the closed folder like he was bracing himself. Mr. Mercer, he said, do you recall your father's estate being settled about 15 years ago? I blinked. My dad. The room around me, the flowers, the soft lighting. Karen's tight mouth blurred for a second. Yeah, he didn't have much. Small house, some savings. We sold the house to pay for his medical bills at the end. Alan shook his head slightly. He had more than you realized. A dull buzzing started in my ears. What are you talking about? Your father, Alan said carefully, was a frugal man. He invested consistently in a modest portfolio for many years. When he passed, those investments were set up in a trust with you as primary beneficiary. But there was an additional stipulation. He opened the folder again, flipped a few pages, and pulled out a thinner document, older, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges. Your father specified that a portion of that trust was designated not just for you, Alan continued, but for your future grandchildren. Specifically, any children of yours to be distributed when they reach certain milestones: college, marriage, first home purchase. My mouth went dry. No one told me that. You would have been informed, Alan said, in general terms, but at the time your then wife, as your legal spouse and co-guardian of your minor children, was able to influence how those documents were implemented. All eyes shifted to Karen. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. In the course of your divorce, Alan went on, you were presented with a series of simplifying agreements. He tapped the old document. One of those granted partial administrative power over the grandchildren's portion of the trust to Mrs. Mercer, now Mrs. Cole, while the children were minors. The stated purpose was to streamline management and avoid duplication of effort. My mind flashed back to that conference room, the tall stack of papers, the way Karen's lawyer had smiled and said it was all just standard estate housekeeping. You're telling me, I said slowly, that when I signed those papers I gave Karen control over my dad's money for our kids. Shared control, Alan corrected, but in practice, yes. Especially since you did not assert your rights as co-trustee or request independent counsel at the time. Megan's voice echoed in my head. We won't have to worry about any complications from Jack. How much money are we talking about? Ethan asked, cutting through the fog. Alan hesitated. The original amount was significant for a man of Mr. Mercer's means. High five figures, low six. However, with prudent investment over the last 15 years, the grandchildren's portion of that trust has grown substantially. Current value is in the mid-six figures, potentially reaching 7 depending on market conditions. 7 figures. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. My father, the man who wore the same jacket for 20 years and rinsed out Ziploc bags to reuse them, had left that kind of money. And I'd signed the rights to manage it over to Karen without even reading. Olivia looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. Wait, she said. Grandpa left a trust for me, for us. Alan nodded. For you and any other grandchildren Jack might have, structured to help with education, housing, major life events. Very carefully set up. And Mom-'s been in charge of it, she asked, turning slowly toward Karen. Karen exhaled through her nose. Someone had to be, she said. Your father wasn't exactly equipped to handle complex investments. I did what needed to be done. What you've done, Alan said evenly, is gradually adjust the beneficiary designations and management structure so that the Mercer family trust feeds directly into the Cole family arrangements. The document we're looking at today, he tapped the new stack, would finalize that process. Olivia's portion of her grandfather's legacy would be effectively merged into the Cole estate with little distinction on paper. In other words, I said, the words coming out like gravel, my dad's money gets swallowed up by Richard's empire. And my daughter's connection to it as a Mercer gets erased. Richard spread his hands as if explaining something to a stubborn child. It's not about erasing, Jack, it's about protecting and growing. The Cole structure is simply better equipped to manage those funds. Everyone benefits. Do I shot back, his eyes cooled. Sentiment has no place in financial planning. Olivia's fingers were trembling now, the bouquet stems shaking slightly. I had no idea, she whispered. Mom, you never told me any of this. You said there wasn't anything left when Grandpa died, just the house and some medical debt. I simplified it, Karen said a little too quickly. You were a kid, Olivia. You didn't need to worry about trusts and percentages. I've been handling it for you. No, Olivia said. Her voice cracked on the word. Not for me, for you. She stared at the documents like they were something poisonous that had just hatched on the table. So if I sign this, she said slowly, I'm what? Giving up any control over what my own grandfather left for me and calling my dad estranged and irresponsible to justify that. Alan inclined his head. In essence, yes. Silence pressed in around us. I looked at my daughter, my little girl who used to fall asleep in the backseat of my truck with French fries still in her hand, and saw the betrayal land on her face in slow motion. When she finally tore her gaze from the papers and looked at Karen, her eyes were wet but clear. Did you know about this? She asked. Karen didn't answer at first. Her jaw worked, biting back whatever came to mind. Then finally, of course I knew. I've been managing it. For you, for us, for this family. Olivia let out a wet laugh that sounded like it hurt. This family, she repeated. You mean the one with the golf course and the imported wine, or the one where my real grandfather saved every dollar he could so his son's kids would have something of their own? Karen's lips thinned. Don't be dramatic, Olivia, you're overreacting. This is all just numbers on paper. Your life doesn't change. My life doesn't change, Olivia said, but the story does. You were about to have me sign something that calls my own father a deadbeat so you could fold his father's money into Richard's. Watch your tone, Karen snapped. I have sacrificed. No, Olivia said sharply. You have arranged, you have managed, you have controlled, you haven't sacrificed, he has. She jerked her chin toward me. For a second, all I could do was swallow the lump in my throat. She turned to Alan. I'm not signing anything, she said. Not until I understand every line, every implication, and not today, not as some side errand on my wedding. Richard's pleasant mask slipped just a hair. The corners of his mouth pulled down, his eyes went flat. You're making a mistake, Olivia, he said. This isn't something you want to drag out. Uncertainty is bad for everyone, for you, for Ethan, for the business. Ethan stepped closer to me, away from Richard, like he was making his position physical. Looks like we're on the same side now, sir, he said quietly. For the first time that day, the word sir didn't make me feel like a relic. It made me feel like a man who'd finally been seen. It's funny how fast a perfect wedding can turn into a courtroom with flowers. By the time we stepped out of that side room, the mood in the reception tent had shifted. You didn't have to be a detective to feel it. The cheerful hum had thinned out into something sharper. Clusters of guests stood in little islands, champagne glasses half full, eyes flicking toward the door we'd just come through. Word travels fast in families, twice as fast when you add money. Karen stormed out ahead of us, heels stabbing the floor, sequins on her dress throwing off little angry sparks of light. Her two sisters, who'd always looked at me like I'd tracked mud into their lives, zeroed in on her before she'd taken 10 steps. What happened? One of them hissed. She put a hand dramatically to her chest. He's trying to ruin her day, she said, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry, just like he ruined our marriage. There it was, the opening shot in the narrative war. I watched a few heads swivel my way, the "oh, that makes sense" look starting to form. Before Karen could wind herself up further, another voice cut through the murmur. That's not how I remember it. Megan, she slipped into the tent while we'd been in the side room, still in her scrubs from an early clinic shift, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked wonderfully, gloriously out of place among the polished dresses and tailored suits. Karen's eyes narrowed. Megan, I didn't realize they let +1s in scrubs past the gate. They let sisters of the groom's conscience in, Megan shot back. Funny how that works. A few people half laughed, then pretended they hadn't. Megan stepped closer, not shouting but not hiding either. You want to tell everyone what's actually going on, Karen, or should I? Karen's smile went brittle. This is not the time or place. You made it the time and place when you dragged my brother's name through the mud in front of half this town, Megan said. She turned to the small crowd that had started to form around them. Jack worked double shifts for 20 years to keep their lights on. He missed parties and barbecues and sleep so Karen could have that first house. You remember that house, right, Karen? The one you cried about leaving because it was too small for your new life. Color rose high on Karen's cheeks. Megan, you have no idea what our marriage was like. I know exactly what it was like, Megan said, because Jack slept on my couch the night you told him he wasn't enough and walked out with half of what he owned. And now, on his daughter's wedding day, you tried to get her to sign a paper calling him a deadbeat so you could fold his father's money into your husband's trust. The last part came out like a gavel bang. Silence rippled outward. Several guests who'd been eavesdropping with half an ear suddenly straightened. A few looked at Karen, then at me, then back at their drinks like maybe they'd picked the wrong side of the room. Karen recovered fast. She always did. That's a gross oversimplification, she said. We were protecting Olivia. Jack doesn't understand how any of this works. I could see Ethan's parents now standing near one of the high-top tables. His mother's expression was pinched, his father's more evaluating, like he was reassessing a deal he'd thought was closed. One of Karen's cousins, a woman I vaguely remembered from a Thanksgiving 15 years ago, edged closer to me. "What's going on, Jack?" she asked in a low voice. "Is this true?" I looked around at the faces, curious, skeptical, some sympathetic, some looking like they'd already bought their tickets to the Karen show and wanted to know if there were refunds. I could have raised my voice, thrown everything I'd learned in that side room like rocks. Instead, I just spoke plainly. "They asked my daughter," I said, "to sign a paper calling me estranged and financially irresponsible, so they could take what my father left for her and tuck it neatly into the Cole family books. And because it's easier to steal from a man if you've convinced everyone he's worthless." A few people winced. One guy at the back muttered, "Damn," under his breath. From somewhere near the buffet, I heard a woman whisper, "You know, I always wondered about the way she talked about him." Another voice answered, "Yes, she did move on fast, didn't she?" Karen's jaw clenched. "You are twisting everything," she snapped. "You always do this, Jack. Play the victim. You could never, Mom." The word cut her off like someone had flipped a switch. Olivia stood in the entrance of the tent, veil pushed back, mascara smudged in the corners of her eyes. Ethan hovered just behind her, a steady presence, his hand at the small of her back but not leading her. Conversations died out in little pockets as people noticed her. She stepped forward, shoulders squared. When she spoke, her voice carried. "I asked my father not to come today," she said, "because I believed lies about him." You could have heard a pin drop. "I believed," she went on, "that he'd make a scene, that he'd embarrass me, that he was unstable, irresponsible. That's what I was told over and over for years." Her gaze found mine, held it, then moved to Megan, then to Ethan's parents. "But when I walked into that side room," she said, "the only people trying to protect me were my husband, a lawyer who barely knows me, and the man I told to stay away, my father." Karen took a step toward her. "Olivia, sweetheart, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearer than I have in a long time," Olivia said. "You were about to have me sign away control of my own grandfather's legacy, the man who taught Dad how to save, how to work, how to show up. You wanted to call him a failure on paper so it would be easier to erase him from the story. This isn't how you talk to your mother," Karen hissed. Olivia's eyes filled again, but she didn't back down. "Maybe if someone had corrected me sooner, I wouldn't have sent my father a text this morning telling him not to come to his own daughter's wedding." She turned back to the crowd, taking a shaking breath. "That ends now." A murmur rolled through the tent, not the gossip kind, something else. Something like respect starting to take shape. Off to the side, Ethan's father stepped closer to his son. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough as they leaned in. "I don't like what Richard and Karen were doing," he said quietly. "That's not how we handle family. You picked the right girl, son. Just make sure she keeps her own name on her own money." Ethan nodded once, jaw tight, eyes on Olivia. For a second, everything seemed to hang in the air, flowers, lights, expectations, waiting to see what would fall where. Then Olivia started walking, not toward the cake, not toward Karen, not toward the band, toward me. People parted in front of her like she was wading through a tide. She stopped when she reached me, right there in the middle of the tent, in front of everyone who'd been told a dozen different versions of who I was. Up close, I could see the tiny tremor in her chin. "Dad," she said, voice barely steady, "I don't deserve this." "Deserve what?" I asked, my throat thick. She swallowed. "A second chance, but I'm asking for one anyway." She took a breath. Would you walk me into my own reception?" Every eye in the room pinned me in place. On one side there was 20 years of being sidelined, lied about, laughed at, pride hurt, and a bone-deep exhaustion that wanted nothing more than to go home, crack a beer, and never have to think about any of this again. On the other side there was my daughter, hand outstretched, asking me in front of everyone who decided I didn't matter to take my place beside her. I had to decide which voice I was going to listen to. I'd imagined walking my daughter down an aisle since she was 5. I just never imagined it would be into a room full of people who now knew exactly who we were. For half a second I froze. Years of hurt and habit dug in their heels. Then I looked at Olivia, my girl, in a white dress and smudged mascara, standing in front of me with her hand out like a kid asking to cross a busy street. Pride had a lot to say in that moment. Love was louder. I nodded. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. Yeah, kiddo, I can do that. I bent my arm old-fashioned like I'd seen in 100 movies. She slipped her hand through, fingers gripping tight, and something in my chest that had been clenched for years finally let go. We turned toward the entrance of the reception tent. The DJ, who'd been watching the whole scene with wide eyes, snapped his headset into place and grabbed his mic like a lifeline. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice wobbling just a bit before smoothing out into professional patter, "please help me welcome, for the first time tonight, Olivia and her father, Jack Mercer." If the crowd was confused by the change in script, they didn't have time to show it. The applause came in a wave. Some of it was hesitant, some loud, some polite. A few people stood. A few stayed seated, but it was there we walked. As we passed Ethan's parents' table, his mother reached out and lightly touched the back of my hand. "Congratulations," she said softly, "on your daughter. She's remarkable." "Thank you," I managed. Megan stood near the dance floor, a napkin balled up in her fist. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist and grinned at me like I just scored the winning goal at a high school game. We crossed the room, past tables covered in white cloths and gold flatware, past centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like I was walking through someone else's life. I was just a dad walking with his kid. At the edge of the dance floor, I stopped. Olivia let go of my arm and turned to face the room with me. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing my hand once before stepping away. The DJ launched into the next announcement. "And now for their first dance as a married couple, please welcome Olivia and Ethan to the floor." The crowd parted. Ethan stepped forward, meeting Olivia in the center. The music shifted to something soft and slow. They began to move together, an awkward sway at first that smoothed out into an easy rhythm. I stood at the edge, hands in my pockets, feeling strangely peaceful. This was their moment. It belonged to them. I was just lucky to be in the room. Halfway through the song, Olivia looked over Ethan's shoulder and caught my eye. She murmured something to him. He nodded and kissed her forehead. She pulled back, turned toward the DJ, and made a small circular motion with her hand. The music faded, then changed. A familiar guitar riff came through the speakers, a song I hadn't heard in years. Old rock, a little cheesy, the kind they played on the classic station I used to listen to in the truck. Olivia and I used to belt the chorus out on back roads with the windows down. It took me a second to recognize it. When I did, my throat closed up. The DJ's voice floated over the intro, and now the bride would like to share a special dance with her father. People turned toward me again. Olivia walked to the edge of the floor and held out her hand. "Come on, Dad," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know the words." I laughed, actually laughed, and stepped out onto the floor. The hardwood felt solid under my boots. She stepped into my arms like she'd done 100 times as a kid, only now she was taller, her head reaching my shoulder instead of my chest. We started to move in a slow circle, the old song wrapping around us. For a few seconds it was just us, no guests. "No money, no lawyers, Dad," she whispered after a verse. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head. "You already said that." "Not like this," she insisted. "I'm sorry for the text, for listening to Mom for so long, for not checking. I just believed her about everything." "I know," I said quietly. "She's loud, I'm not." A watery laugh escaped her. "You can be," she said. "I just didn't let you." We turned, the chandelier spinning lazily above us. "I wasn't perfect," I admitted. "I missed things, I worked too much. I thought if I could just get us one more rung up the ladder, it would fix everything. It didn't." She shook her head against my shoulder. "You were there more than I knew," she said. "I just remembered the times you weren't. Mom helped with that." "I never stopped loving you," I said. The words came out easier than I expected. "Even when I was in that little apartment by myself, even when you didn't call, even when you told me not to come today." She winced. "I hate that I wrote that. I hate that you felt you had to." We moved in another slow circle. "Can we start from here?" she asked, voice small. "Not pretend nothing happened, just start from here." I tightened my arms around her just a fraction. "From here," I said. "Sounds like a good place to start." We fell quiet for a few beats, just listening to the song. The chorus came around, the one we used to shout in the car. I heard her hum it into my shirt. "Hey," she said suddenly, "you remember that little ring you gave me when I was like 12? My heart kicked. "Yeah," I said. "Silver, too big, you said it would fall off." "I found it again last week," she murmured, "in an old jewelry box. I was going to just look at it, but I couldn't put it back down." She leaned back enough to look up at me. Her eyes were bright, not just from tears now, but from something like relief. "I put it on a chain," she said, "under the dress. I've been wearing it all day." She reached up, fingertips brushing the spot at her collarbone where I'd seen the glint earlier. "I never stopped being your kid, Dad," she said. "I just forgot how to act like it. That did me in. I had to look up at the lights to keep it together long enough to finish the song." When it ended, the room burst into applause again. This time it sounded different, less automatic, more human. We stepped off the floor. Ethan met us, wrapping an arm around Olivia's waist and clapping my shoulder once. "You two okay?" he asked. "We will be," I said. Out of the corner of my eye I saw movement. Alan Price, hovering just at the edge of the crowd like a ghost in a gray suit, caught my eye and inclined his head. He approached us quietly, waiting until the applause died down a little. "Mr. Mercer, Olivia," he said, voice low but steady. "I hope I'm not intruding." Olivia wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "No," she said. "You're fine." Alan looked between us. "I just wanted to say, when you're both ready, I believe we can not only protect your grandfather's trust, but also petition for a full accounting of how it's been managed over the years." He didn't look at Karen when he said it. He didn't have to. Across the room I saw her watching us. Her posture was rigid, smile frozen in place as she pretended to laugh at something one of Richard's friends had said, but her eyes were locked on our little huddle. There was still one more reckoning coming, and this time I wasn't going to be on the outside of the door. The wedding was over, the flowers were wilting, and my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, Corinne. I was back in my townhouse, sitting at the edge of my bed with my shoes still on. My suit jacket was draped over the chair, my tie half undone. Sunlight leaked around the cheap blinds, picking out the dust in the My body felt like I'd been hit by a truck, emotionally, not physically, but underneath the exhaustion there was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Light. The text preview glowed on the screen. You turned my daughter against me. No hello, no how could you? Just that. I stared at it for a long moment. A year ago, 5 years ago, I probably would have started typing back, explaining, defending. Trying to prove that I hadn't whispered a single word against her to Olivia, that Corinne had done that all by herself. This time I just set the phone face down on the nightstand. For the first time in decades, I didn't take the bait. I let the silence be my answer and lay back on the bed, still in my dress shirt, and closed my eyes. A week later, I sat in a much nicer room than my townhouse, at a polished conference table that smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Alan Price's office looked exactly like you'd expect an old-school lawyer's office to look. Shelves lined with law books, framed degrees on the wall, a window with a view of the town square where people wandered in and out of the coffee shop. At the table with me were Olivia, in jeans and a sweater with her hair in a ponytail, Ethan in a button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and Megan still in her scrubs, sneakers squeaking every time she shifted. Alan adjusted his glasses and tapped a folder in front of him. So, he said, here's where we stand. Broke it down in plain English, the way good lawyers do when they're talking to people who don't live in their world. We have your father's original trust, he said, nodding at me, which clearly names you, Mr. Mercer, and your future grandchildren as beneficiaries. That's our starting point. We then have the creative adjustments that were made during your divorce, giving Mrs. Cole administrative control over the grandchildren's portion while the children were minors. He paused, glancing at Olivia. You are no longer a minor, that changes things. Olivia nodded, jaw set. And finally, Alan continued, we have the proposed document from the Cole side, which we are not signing, that would have effectively merged your grandfather's legacy into the Cole estate and codified some unflattering and inaccurate descriptions of your father. He flipped the offending document shut like it was a bad smell. Our options are as follows, he said. 1. We can request a full review of the trust documents with the current institution holding the funds. That includes all administrative decisions made over the last 15 years. Megan let out a low whistle. So an audit. In layman's terms, yes, Alan said. 2. We petition to remove Mrs. Cole from any administrative role on the grounds that the minors are now adults and there is a clear conflict of interest. That made my stomach unclench a little. And 3, he went on, we create a new structure, one that clearly states this portion of the trust is for you, Olivia, and any future children you may have, with Mr. Mercer named as an advisor, not a controller, not a gatekeeper. An advisor that would accomplish 2 things. It honors your grandfather's original intent, and it makes it very clear that your father is not begging for access to your money. Olivia leaned forward, arms crossed on the table. I don't want to punish Mom, she said. I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I don't want this to turn into revenge. Alan nodded. That's wise. I just don't want any more lies, she said. On paper or otherwise, if there's money Grandpa left, I want it to be what he meant it to be. Not a line item in someone else's balance sheet. Ethan reached over and laced his fingers with hers. Our life together doesn't need to eat your past, Liv, he said. It just needs to add to it. We can keep Cole money over here, he gestured with his free hand, and Mercer money over there, separate, equal. No one has to pretend one swallowed the other. Alan smiled at that. You're all more mature than most of my clients, he said. Makes my job easier. We spent the next hour going through drafts, simpler ones this time. No buried character assassinations, no clauses that turned feelings into facts. By the end, the new structure was clear. Corinne would be removed from any role tied to the trust. The funds my father had scraped together over a lifetime of careful saving would be set aside plainly in Olivia's name, with language specifying future grandchildren. My own position would be advisory only, enough to recognize the truth of who I was in her life, not enough to make anyone think I was trying to cash in. When we finally signed, it felt nothing like that day in Corinne's lawyer's office years ago. Back then, I'd signed out of guilt and exhaustion, trusting that other people would look out for my kids. This time, I signed with my eyes open. As Olivia pushed the last document back toward Alan, she let out a long breath like she'd been holding it since the day of the wedding. Feels lighter, she said. Truth usually does, Megan murmured. We walked out of the office together. Olivia hugged me on the sidewalk. Ethan shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief, awkward half-hug like he wasn't quite used to it yet. You did good, sir, he said. Your dad, too. That stuck with me on the drive home. My bank account didn't look any different that night when I logged in to pay a couple of bills. Same modest balance, same old mortgage company name, same car payment, but I didn't feel poor anymore. I thought about my father, reusing coffee cans as storage containers, slipping $5 bills into a tin under the sink just in case. About how he never once complained when I dropped off Olivia so I could pick up an extra shift. About how he'd left what he could, not just for me, but for a granddaughter he barely got to know. I thought about Megan, always there with a couch, a cup of coffee, or a sharp word when I needed one more than I wanted it. That was the real inheritance. Not numbers on a page, steady work, quiet loyalty, the idea that you keep showing up even when nobody claps. Now, sitting in my little living room, I watched those things pass on to Olivia and her new family. In the way she'd stood up in that tent. In the way Ethan had drawn a line with his own relatives. In the way we'd all agreed not to let lies stand just because they were written down. A week later, I printed out a photo Megan had emailed me. I bought a cheap frame from the drugstore and hung it on the wall above the TV. It was from the wedding, not the staged portraits, but a candid someone had snapped. Olivia and Ethan in the center, laughing at something just out of frame. And on Olivia's other side, arm around her shoulder, laughing just as hard, was me. No one was cut out, no one was cropped off the edge. I stood there for a long moment just looking at it. Then I turned toward where you'd be, listening to this, and let the story settle. My daughter once told me, "Dad, don't come to my wedding," I said, half to myself, half to whoever needed to hear it. She thought she was protecting her new life from her old one. What she didn't know was that her new life was built on a lie about me and about the grandfather she barely remembered. I thought about that text, about the papers, about the ring on the chain under her dress. Here's what I learned, I went on. Never sign away your worth just to keep the peace. Never assume being quiet is the same thing as being kind. Sometimes the only way your kids can really see you is when you show up, even when they tell you not to. I looked at the photo one more time, at the laugh lines around my own eyes. If you're a father who's been pushed to the back row, listen to me, I said. You're not done yet. Show up, stand steady, tell the truth. The people who really love you will eventually see it. I smiled just a little. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stick around. I've got a lot more to tell.